I have a question for everybody because one of the topics that we've been battling over the last 6 months is all of the mystery, all of the unknown about UNC football. If we assume the biggest addition to the program this offseason was Bill Belichick, what's the second biggest addition? Is it one of the transferred defensive players like a Thaddeus Dixon? Is it one of the Gio Lopez, the quarterback? Is it who's the second biggest addition? Because I'll tell you who I think it is. Belichick. Steve Belichick. Aside from Bill Belichick, his son, one of his two sons on staff, Steve Belichick, might be the biggest acquisition of the offseason. And I don't think he'll ever get seen as that when you are around your dad as Bill Belichick, right? I think if he wanted to get the credit that he is due, staying in Washington probably would have been the move, which is where he was, University of Washington, not Commanders, UW. But there's also some cool parts, I'm sure, about, hanging out with family and being around your dad every day. So he jumps over, and he's now the defensive coordinator for UNC, which I think is kind of a big deal because, sans his dad, right? Bill Belichick, not a part of it. Last year, Steve Belichick turned around a Washington defense pretty good. And I have the stats here, and there's an entire article on this on WRALSportsFan.com. You can check it out. It's on Steve Belichick with quotes and things. I'm not going to read you the whole article, but I can give you this. Washington's, so I'm going to call them the Huskies because I feel like calling them Washington, everybody thinks Commanders. The Huskies defense in 2023, the year before Steve Belichick showed up, was ranked 96th in total defense and 54th in scoring defense. He jumped that all the way up to 28th in total defense. They gave up almost 75, or actually a little over 75 yards less per game. Still gave up a decent amount of points, 53rd in scoring defense, but the yards going down so much pretty much tells you that just means the defense was put in worse situations, right? Other teams didn't have to go as far to score and things like that. So the defense got a lot better under Steve Belichick. That is important for a few reasons. One, that's taking over someone else's unit and making it better, which is what UNC is trying to do, and something that Bill Belichick hasn't done in decades, right? Bill Belichick, during his time with the Patriots, he hasn't been the new coach taking over someone else's roster in literal decades. And that's hard, right? Finding guys that you didn't handpick or getting rid of guys that you didn't handpick and bringing them in quickly and having 70 new faces and all of this, that's hard. Steve Belichick is the one that has more experience in it. The other part that's exciting about it is it was in college. He had to make a defense improve while they had to go take geology class during the day, right? Bill Belichick has never had to worry about that. Bill Belichick has never had to worry about life in the dorms, right? Like Steve Belichick has, at least for a year, and he did it well. And then there's this third part, right? The more I read the article and the more I then did my own research into Steve Belichick, some of the best transfers in their recruiting class transferred from University of Washington. They followed Steve Belichick. Now, I'm all for, and I've been extremely complimentary of what I think Bill Belichick's name and aura and prestige will do for the recruiting at UNC. But I'm not going to attribute much of getting Thaddeus Dixon or the other four-star linebacker that jumped with him from Washington. I'm not going to attribute that to Bill Belichick as much as I am Steve Belichick, who as their defensive coordinator came to UNC, and then they followed. Then another one. I'm going to ask you a question. Bill Belichick, rightfully so, is at least, appears, right? Because so much of it is unknown with Bill because he doesn't let a lot of people into his inner circle. Rightfully so. He seems pretty confident in his evaluations and the way he does things, right? Bill Belichick doesn't have to look around and go, you guys think I'm doing this right. You guys think I'm doing this the right way, correct? because he's got 8 Super Bowl trophies or Super Bowl rings saying, yeah, the way you do things produces results, right? So he doesn't have to look around and ask for advice very often. As a matter of fact, why would he? But if Bill Belichick is going to listen to anybody about how to work in college, if there's anybody that could say, like, actually, that works in the NFL, that ain't going to work here, his son would be a pretty good choice, right?
I felt like when the hiring, became a real thing, when it went
Belichick
from
or Steve? Or
Bill. I mean,
Steve?
both
Okay.
together. I mean, at the same time, because when it was kind of becoming real, a lot of the hypothesis from online conversation from some media was well, maybe he's just trying to secure the job as coach in waiting for his son, which would make sense, as Steve has again had time coaching in the college ranks, whereas Bill really hasn't. And there was also a lot of conversation early on about whether or not he was leveraging it to maybe get an NFL job. And if that were the case, obviously that would help boost Steve's chances in potentially, securing a higher position within UNC's coaching staff. But, I mean, it would kind of make sense. Now,
for sure.
I think as time has gone on and the fact that he didn't leave for an NFL job on June 1st or July 1st, whenever the buyout had dropped down, like some people had mentioned on early in the process. It's interesting.
And when the buyout dropped down, I mean, I'm sure I read the same conspiracy theories you did, right? Like, oh, this lets him leave on the eve of the season, and then they're stuck, right? They can't go hire. There's no other, coaches out there looking for a job. They'll be forced to promote from within, and Steve Belichick will get the job. Then he has a year audition, right? Kind of to prove himself.
That's like chaotic evil. Leave on the Sunday of Labor Day weekend. Actually, I'm not taking this job, but you could promote my son.
Yeah, I don't see that happening.
No, that'd be insane.
But I do think Steve Belichick ends up being pretty important in this thing for a lot of reasons. And not only that, we just had Joel Bryant. Joel Bryant, high school OT. Check out all the work they do covering high school sports in the state of North Carolina at highschoolot.com. They got the Jamboree coming up tomorrow in Wake Forest. Some of the best high school players in the state will be participating. And we talked about Amir Brown, a running back for Rollsville High School that is committed to UNC. He is a rising junior. So let's do some quick math here. Bill Belichick's age. He is 73, okay? Which means, boom, junior season for Amir Brown, Bill Belichick is 73. Senior season for Amir Brown, senior in high school, Bill Belichick is 74. Freshman year for Amir Brown at UNC, Bill Belichick will be 75, and that will be the last year that there's any guaranteed money on the contract that Bill Belichick signed. I would assume you're not committing to a coach that 76 when you're a sophomore. Even if you leave early for the NFL, your junior year, he's 77.
Almost old enough to be president.
I would assume that there's somebody else on staff that you feel like will be around. And I don't know if that's Steve, but I wouldn't be surprised if it's Steve. Maybe it's Freddie Kitchens. Maybe it's somebody. But I think in order for the program to have stability, you have to have somebody who's a bit younger in those meetings, in those recruiting efforts. And there is a different energy for Steve Belichick than Bill Belichick. One of my favorite conversations we had at ACC kickoff was a portion of our conversation with Will Hardy. Now, Will Hardy is a safety for UNC. Position battle, trying to work his way into the starting lineup. He's from Georgia, played at a powerhouse down there. And in high school, comes from a family of football players. There's NFL All-Pros in his family tree. His brothers have played college football. His dad played college football. His grandpa played college football. So this is a dude that gets it, right? And we're talking with Will. And Will Hardy being a member of the secondary, I call him, he's a triple Belichick. Right? So if you're in the secondary for UNC, your position coach, your secondaries coach is Brian Belichick, one of Bill Belichick's sons. Your defensive coordinator, so the coordinator for your side of the ball, is Steve Belichick. and your head coach is Bill Belichick. That is a fascinating position to live in college. Fascinating. Especially because a lot of times, and I'm just, when you need to vent about your coordinator, you go to your position coach. When you need to vent about your head coach, you might go to your coordinator or your position coach. I don't know if you're allowed to do that, right? Like, why is coach always singling me out? Well, that's how dad is. It's just a funny beast. But one of the questions I asked Will Hardy was, all right, we're on this side of the room. Your position coach, your coordinator, and your head coach are on that side of the room. You want to talk to one of them. How do you get their attention? Right? Because you can't, do you just yell Belichick and then hope they all come over and then say, not you, I wanted him? Like, how does it work? And this was the answer he gave me after thinking about it, right? First of all, he said, Coach Belichick is Bill. That, like, it was minus 1,000 odds that if you called one Coach Belichick, it was going to be Bill Belichick. Head coach, Coach Belichick. His position coach, Brian Belichick. Guess what they call him? Coach Brian or Brian? Real creative stuff there, right? Guess what name he gave for Steve? He said, I guess Coach Steve. Well, actually, Stevie B. He gave him Stevie B. Now, like, at the time, I just laughed, right? At the time, that's funny. All right, we got Coach Belichick, we got Coach Brian, we got Stevie B. That's like, it's a good punchline. And I don't know if he was being like super duper true about it, but the fact that thought went into his mind shows Steve has a different relationship with those players.
Yeah, it's probably a little lighter.
It's a little lighter. It's quite frankly more college-y, if that makes any sense. There are certain coaches that are just built a little bit better for relating to that age while keeping it hierarchical. I don't know if that's a word. While keeping the authority, right? There were coaches in my playing career, played at the University of Delaware. It's not the ACC by any stretch, but, we were on scholarship too. There were coaches that were college hardos, if you will. They were college football hardos, right? Like everything is that if they told us to run, we'd run. But, I don't know if anybody was given extra for them. And then there were coaches that had nicknames, that would joke with you, would walk up to a receiver and say, you're two ice cream sandwiches away from being a tight end, like have those kind of jokes. And if they asked us to run, strain through the line, like finish it, like it was, you just wanted to make that person like happy and proud and those sorts of things. And it was just a different type of leadership. And I think that in a lot of ways plays better in college. So if that is the different type of energy that Steve Belichick brings, I think that's going to be a requirement. I think that's going to be a necessity for UNC to play well. Because Bill Belichick will bring all the seriousness you need. Right? And at times this year, there's going to be a ton of pressure on that team. Can you imagine if they lose to TCU and it's not an aesthetically pleasing loss to start the season? The next 2 or 3 games, you're going to feel like you have the world on your shoulders because if you lose any of these, now all of a sudden the experiment is failing. Or how about this? What if you win the first 3? What if you win the first 4? Right? What if you're 5-1 or 7-1? What if all of a sudden things? Now there's a different type of pressure. Now you're upholding the legacy of Bill Belichick. You're going to need somebody that can cut that tension. I think whether you win or lose, it's always going to fall on the head coach's front door, right, or doorstep. It's always going to be them that has to answer for it. I think Steve Belichick might be the lesser talked about pivot point for how good the season is going to end up being for UNC.